And welcome back. We're gonna try and clean up a little bit of our pistons here and our gasket surface on our block. And it doesn't look too bad compared to what the cylinder head looked like, but before I start tearing down the front of this motor any, I'm going to see what I can do about cleaning those pistons off. They don't look too terrible. I'm going to try a little bit of the green Scotch-Brite that we used with the cylinder heads in conjunction with a little bit of brake clean and kind of see where that gets us in the grand scheme of things. Again, they don't look too terrible. It's probably kind of an unnecessary step, but we're cleaning up all the other parts before we reassemble it, and why not? Why not treat this the same as we're doing everything else? So I'm going to crawl into this engine compartment, and what you're seeing right here is the number one cylinder at top dead center. So you got the number one cylinder here, and then looks to be the number 6 cylinder is also at the top here. So I'm going to attempt to clean up number 1 and number 6, and then I'll bring it back and show you what that looks like. If that works, then we'll turn the engine over a little bit, bring the next 2 cylinders up, and kind of repeat the process. But like I said, I'm going to climb into the engine compartment here, go to work on this in a little bit, and I'll bring it back and kind of show you what it looks like. Talk to you in a bit. Bye. And welcome. I wanted to shoot a little bit of a precursor to what you're about to see in the following video with us cleaning off the tops of these piston heads and a little bit of block kind of as a side effect. Is this something that you necessarily need to do? Probably not. The pistons you're going to see only have about 36 or so thousand miles on them. They did clean up relatively well, about as well as all the other videos I've seen on the internet of individuals doing this. Will they get dirty again? Absolutely. Are they going to turn back into the same state they were before and have carbon deposits on them? Absolutely, 100%. So could you get by without cleaning the tops of your pistons? Yeah, I reckon you could, and you would be just fine. But it's one of those things. You're in here, you're cleaning up all the other surfaces, putting everything together as clean as you can, especially on engine assembly, is only going to benefit you longer in the long run. So to each their own. If it's something that you choose not to do, that's great. If you choose to do it and you find these steps helpful, that's awesome as well. I just want to put that little bit of a precursor in there that because again, I'm sure there's going to be some individuals comment on this video that it's an unnecessary step, and maybe it is, but again, we're in here, they're exposed, we have access to it, and we have the ability to clean it. Might as well do it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. With that said, I thank you, and we'll start cutting into the video from here. Thank you. And welcome back. So I just want to show you the aftermath of our pistons. So here's the after shot. Let's get the one on the other side here. So far cry better than what they looked like before. And what we ended up doing was, you can just see it's just a microfiber towel. You can see all the carbon and such that came off those 2 pistons. But just like we did with the cylinder heads, used a little bit of Scotch-Brite. And this is the green 3M Scotch-Brite pad. And a little bit of brake clean. Just sprayed down the Scotch-Brite pad. Got it soaked in a particular area. Worked the area until I ran out of brake clean. Moved to another area of the Scotch-Brite pad. And just kind of kept rotating the Scotch-Brite pad and soaking it down with brake clean until we got it to the phase that you see it in there. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just wipe the area down once again, just to remove any residue. And then I'll rotate the engine over, bring the next 2 pistons up, and bring them up and do the same. Now I've also seen this done with shop towels. And Engine Bright also seems to do a pretty good job of getting these clean. This is just my method of doing this, and yes, it does leave some swirl marks and some minor scratches on the top of the piston, but I'm not concerned with minor scratches on the top of the piston. It gets far more abuse than that just in normal operation. So we're going to continue cleaning these, and once we get them all cleaned up, we'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. I wanted to drill into this process and show you a little bit more. As you saw me discuss in the previous video when we cleaned the first two cylinder heads, I'm just using again a piece of this 3M Scotch-Brite, and I cleaned up the first 4 cylinder heads, but I wanted to show you this in a little bit more detail rather than me just saying, oh, this is what I use, and cutting back to images and showing you that it's all done. So I've taken our Scotch-Brite here, and I've soaked down this center section here with a little bit of brake clean. You can see it there. I'm going to try to get you in here because I have to hold the camera as I do this. I'm just going to show you. That's what the piston looks like. I'm just going to lightly scrub on the top of this and kind of show you that it does break this up. And you can kind of see that in the shot there. This is probably going to be the worst video of this ever, but you can see that kind of smearing and breaking up. And the brake clean will dry, and that's in a sense what I'm doing. So as the brake clean starts to dry up, I just keep applying it to the Scotch-Brite and keep working it over the piston, as you saw, and until I'm satisfied I've got all the big chunks of built up carbon off of it, and it looks like one of the ones you see there that have been done. So again, just wanted to show you that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this when I do it. I'm just putting enough of basically soaking it and putting enough of a pressure on it, just kind of a little bit more than average. I guess it's hard to describe it, but I'm not putting my body weight into it, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm just kind of scouring over the top of that piston, letting the brake clean do its job, get that carbon start to break up, let the Scotch-Brite pad do its job, and also help to break up that carbon. And it'll take, probably, at least for me, it's been taking about maybe a good 5-6 minutes, and several applications of brake clean, keeping this pad saturated until the pistons come out to clean enough to where I'm happy with them. So hopefully that little bit of a demonstration kind of shows you what I'm doing there. And I'll cut this video more than likely in between where you see 2 of them done and when you see 4 of them done. So that's why it looks a little bit out of order and you see me with a clean piece. I just wanted to explain that a bit further. And also, when I was talking about coating the cylinder bores down, you'll see that stuff that's kind of streaking down the cylinder walls when the pistons start to go down. That's what I'm cleaning up. So I'm taking a clean shop towel, soaking it down with some motor oil, and wiping up that residue again, just to get it cleaned out, and also to help coat those cylinder bores down with a little bit of engine oil, just to keep them lubricated and protected. And with that being said, I'll do as I promised, and I'll bring you back when they're all complete. Thank you much. And welcome back. You can see that we got our next 2 pistons there and there cleaned up. Same process as before. And now what I'm doing is, when I'm bringing the pistons down to bring the next 2 up, since this was the one we cleaned prior, and the one back there was the one cleaned prior, before I rotate them again, I'm taking another microfiber towel. Again, I'm just coating it down with some engine oil. In this case, the same oil that's supposed to be in this, that's called for in this engine, which is OW40. And we're wiping down the insides of the cylinder bores, just to get any of the brake clean or debris that manages to make it down past, that makes it down between the gap of the piston and the piston walls. Because you will get, when you're doing this process, you will get some of that brake clean residue and some of that debris that gets down between the piston and such. So again, as we're bringing it down, and you'll be able to see when it trails down into the piston and kind of dries. Again, that's why I'm just wiping the cylinders down with some oil. You can see that was a nice clean microfiber cloth when we started, and that's just after wiping down the first 2 cylinder bores before we bring those rotate the engine and bring those 2 pistons back up again. Again, just to help keep some of the debris out of the cylinder walls, but this process seems to be working well. And as a side effect, hopefully you can see it there. You can see the cylinder head surface itself where the gasket would normally sit. You'll notice it's coming out nice and shiny. So as a side effect of using that Scotch-Brite and kind of going over the piston, we're also doing a nice job of cleaning up the gasket mating surface itself. Now, I won't concentrate completely on getting that mating surface cleaned off 100% until we're ready for the reinstall. Once I'm done here for this evening getting the pistons and everything cleaned up, I will go over the face of that with a little bit of, again, just a shop towel with a little bit of engine oil just to kind of protect the face of that to make sure that that gasket mounting surface doesn't start to kind of rust on us, because that block is steel, unlike the cylinder heads, which are aluminum, and the pistons, which look like they are also aluminum. You know, the block itself is steel, and I just want to, you know, make sure there's not any gouges in it that start to accumulate, or scratches in it, I should say, that start to accumulate any kind of rust. And then when we're ready to put the gaskets on, I'll go over it with a little bit more brake clean, finish cleaning up the gasket mating surface itself. Then we'll get it all cleaned off, get it all dried, again with a little bit more brake clean just to clean up the debris, and then we'll start putting gaskets and everything back in place once we're ready. And I think that's it for this particular update. Again, it's just a piece of this 3M Scotch-Brite, and you can see this one particular piece I've used for 4 pistons at this point. I may switch out to a new piece at this point in time, because what I'm doing is I'm constantly rotating this to avoid getting this material too thin, because I don't want pieces of this material necessarily breaking off and getting to places it shouldn't be. Now, with that being said, I'm sure you've noticed that we do have exposed oil passages here and exposed water passages here because we have the cylinder heads off. I'm not too concerned with getting too much type debris into those water jackets because I did take a siphon earlier this week and put it down into these lower water jackets between the cylinders here and siphon out the remaining radiator fluid, just to, or I should say the remaining coolant, just to make sure the block is empty. And when we're done with this, when we're ready for reassembly, I'll fill those passages back up again with a little bit of a hand pump, and then immediately drain them back out just to help flush any kind of debris that may have accumulated in those jackets. I will more than likely, I think I'll do it on this one. I'm going to splice in a clip. If I decide to do it, I believe I'm going to. I'll splice in a clip of me using that hand pump to drain out the remaining coolant out of those passages, as opposed to pulling the drain bolts off either side. There's a drain bolt for the block on the left and right hand side of this motor. In one side, if it's a bit easier to get to the other, but it is a bit of a pain to get to them, especially the one here in the passenger side. Rather than break those loose and run the risk of not getting them to seal again or anything of that nature, it was easier just to get a little siphon pump and, you know, siphon it out of the water passages itself. Does that get rid of 100% of the coolant? Probably not. There's probably a small amount that still remains in that block. But with that being said, like I said, I'll splice that part of the video into the end of this one. And then you'll see what I'm talking about. And the reason for doing that is that early on, if you remember in the videos, we talked about there was possible mixing the coolant or coolant contamination. Now, I haven't found any of that, thankfully, but just to make sure that we did get 100% of the old coolant out of this block, or as close as we could, that's why I elected to go ahead and kind of siphon out what was left. Plus, again, just to kind of remove that coolant and any contaminants that may have fallen into those water passages during our disassembly process. While we're speaking of coolant, one final item is that, yes, you haven't seen me drain the engine oil yet. We will eventually get to that step. Once we have the remainder of everything cleaned up and we're starting the reassembly process, draining the oil will more than likely be the last thing that I do. And the reason for that is remember, we've got exposed oil passages and water passages. When cracking those heads loose and letting that coolant drain, some of that coolant will more than likely end up inside the oil passages, and it will work its way down and kind of end up at the bottom of the oil pan below the oil. And the oil will kind of sit there as a weight on top of the water. So I'll show you when we do this, but when we crack that drain plug loose, you'll probably see for the first couple of seconds, water and coolant come out of the oil pan before the rest of the oil drains out. So that's the reason why I have not drained the oil yet, and it will be the reason why it'll more than likely be one of the last things we do after we have everything reassembled and we're ready to put nice, fresh, clean engine oil back into the system. Well, with that being said, that's enough rambling. I'm going to continue to spin this engine over, clean out these cylinder bores, and get these tops of these pistons cleaned up. I'll concentrate a little bit on the gasket mating surface on the block, but once we get that done, I will coat that down with a little bit of engine oil just to prohibit any rust that might start to show up on that mating surface. With that being said, I will let you go. And actually, I'll do one more thing. I'll get all 8 pistons cleaned up. I'll bring you back for that, and then we'll cut the video at that point. Catch you in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. I just want to, I'm not quite sure what video I'm going to fit this in, but just in reference to our cleanup and our prep, remember in the last video we had the driver's side head taken off, finally removed, and I went ahead and spun the engine around and put the engine in the time. So our timing mark on our phaser is up at our 12 o'clock, and our cylinder 1 is up to our top dead center. In the reference to that, one of the things in the earlier videos, if you remember, was I mentioned the possibility of having intermixed coolant, which can end up being a very bad thing. And I did find some evidence in one of the blocked off water passages where water just kind of accumulates in the block, having a little bit of a gummy residue. Now, it's been nothing major. All the other water passages have been clear with no issues of anything substantial. But one of the things I wanted to do was just go ahead and drain the block completely, or at least as much as we could of all of its fluid. Now, dropping the heads and the water pump and everything will only remove so much of it. One of the better things to do, that I've looked it up, and there is actually a drain plug on either side of the block to completely drain the block of fluid. Well, barring doing that, because it's kind of a bear to get to on each side, I thought the next best thing might be is to get one of these little siphon pumps. Now, I'll put a link in the description of the video this ends up in, but this was like 20 bucks, and it comes with a thread, or I should say a hose, nylon white hose that you see there, that's small enough to even get into the passages between the cylinders and such. So what I'm doing is I'm just going through and putting it into each one of those bores and just pulling out the remainder of the antifreeze. That way, when we go to reassemble this block and put nice fresh clean antifreeze in it, we've got as much of the old stuff out as we can, and we minimize the risk of any kind of intermix. Now again, this is only a concern for what I'm doing here because of the evidence that we found, where it looks like maybe at one point in time, and sometime in 2016 before we purchased the truck, somebody did a service work on it and put purple coolant in the coolant reservoir when the truck itself was actually loaded with orange coolant. And when I went to get coolant to replace what we drained out of the radiator, I was given purple coolant. And I thought it was all good to go because it matched the color of the coolant that was in the bottle. So again, but I digress. Not to get on too much of a rant about that. So this is just, again, maybe to show hopefully what might be a useful tip to others. So rather than having to remove those drain plugs on either side of the block, this little siphon is actually doing a very nice job of being able to siphon out kind of what's left inside the block. And all I'm doing is putting the tube in the little passages, like right here square and there square, and those little triangle shaped passages between the cylinder bores and the bottom, just to siphon out what's left. One other thing that we did is that we rotated the engine around, is that since it was going to be a while before we could get to putting this engine back together, even though we are in a garage and we have the AC running, which is helping to dehumidify the place, we went ahead and just took some engine oil, the oil that would be inside this vehicle calls for, which is 0W40. Just put some on a shop towel and just went around, and for the pistons that were not up, the ones that are down right now or have any type of the bore exposed, we just wiped them down with some engine oil to keep any rusting from occurring on the bores itself. With that being said, I'm going to try to crawl up here in the engine compartment real quick, and you'll have to mind the camera work. Apologies. And hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to take the tube out of that passage, snake it back around all of this, put it into, hopefully you can see that there. Like I said, this is kind of hard to do because of how I have to crawl into this engine compartment, but kind of getting in that tube as far in there as I can get it, which is there. And I'll show you, and this bulb has a check valve in it, but you'll see the fluid now start to get sucked out of that passage there, and you can see there's quite a bit of it. It's able to pull out, and we just have the end going into our main drip pan, and you can see it's a nice constant flow. Oh, there you go, we're starting to get some air out of that one. You know, and it may not get 100% of it, but if we're in the high 90s as far as what we've been able to drain out, I'll take that as a victory. And I just want to show that to you real quick. But we're going to progress on. We're going to see if we can get the most of the remaining fluid out of here. And when we bring you back, I'll show you how we're going to clean the cylinder heads as well as the front face of the block here and the pistons and such when we go to reassemble things. But I'll chat you later. Bye. And welcome back. As promised, we've gotten all of our cylinders, pistons head cleaned up on both sides. You can see, so you can see that there. So that's all 8. Ready to go. And like I said, as we were turning it over, I wiped any excess that managed to trickle down into the cylinder bores up. Thoroughly coated the cylinder bores with oil, and also wiped down the gasket mating surface on the block with a little bit of oil as well, just to help protect it and And then when we get ready to reassemble everything, then I'll come back, finish up cleaning up the mating surface of what hadn't been cleaned, just as a byproduct of cleaning up the piston heads. And then we'll give everything one thorough cleaning, let it dry, then obviously put our gaskets on and start to reassemble. But we've got our system back in time, so it's kind of hard to see the mark in that timing sprocket, but we've got that at the 12 o'clock position, and you can see our number one cylinder over here is at top dead center. And again, I just brought it back up in the time, just kind of out of habit. What we'll do next and the coming up videos is that we'll start to get the oil pump, timing gears, chain, all of that out of here. I'm hoping I don't have to drop the entire oil pan to get that sump disconnected. I'm hoping I can just back a couple of more screws off on either side and be able to drop it down enough to get that 10mm bolt that you see down there on that oil pump off, and then we can take the oil pump itself off. And like I said, we'll bring you back as we get to the next step. But like I said, what you saw here may not be the way that you want to clean your cylinder heads, and if you've got a different way of doing it, again, that's great. As you can see, I think a 3M Scotch-Brite pad and a little bit of brake clean went quite a long way. Those pistons look a heck of a lot better than what they did before. Other than that, I'll let you go for now, and we'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you.